Jeremiah 52. Zedekiah was 21 years old when he became king and reigned for 11 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Hamutal, daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah. He did what was evil in the eyes of Hashem, like everything that Jehoiakim had done. It was because the wrath of Hashem was upon Jerusalem and Judah until he would cast them away from his presence that Zedekiah rebelled against the king of Babylonia. It happened in the 9th year of Zedekiah's reign, in the 10th month, on the 10th of the month, that Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylonia, he and his entire army, came to wage war against Jerusalem and encamped near it, and built a siege tower around it. The city came under siege until the 11th year of King Zedekiah, in the 4th month, on the 9th of the month, and the famine in the city became critical. There was no food for the people of the land. The city was breached, and all the men of war fled and left the city during the night, by way of the gate between the walls, which was near the king's garden, although the Chaldeans were upon the city all around. And they went by way of the Arabah. The Chaldean army pursued the king and overtook Zedekiah at the plains of Jericho, and his entire army dispersed from him. They seized the king and brought him up to the king of Babylonia at Riblah, in the land of Hamath, and he spoke words of judgment to him. The king of Babylonia slaughtered Zedekiah's sons before his eyes. He also slaughtered the officers of Judah in Riblah. He blinded Zedekiah's eyes. Then they bound him in copper chains. The king of Babylonia brought him to Babylonia, where he was put in the place of detention until the day of his death. In the 5th month, on the 10th of the month, which was the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylonia, Nebuzaradan, the chief executioner, who was in the service of the king of Babylonia, came to Jerusalem. He burned the temple of Hashem, the king's palace, and all the buildings of Jerusalem, and every great house he burned in fire. And all the walls of Jerusalem all around, the entire Chaldean army that was with the chief executioner, smashed. And some of the poor people, the remainder of the people who were left in the city, the defectors who had surrendered to the king of Babylonia, and the rest of the masses, Nebuzaradan, the chief executioner, sent into exile. But the chief executioner left some of the poor people of the land to be workers in vineyards and in fields. The copper pillars of the temple of Hashem, and the laver stands, and the copper sea that were in the temple of Hashem, the Chaldeans shattered and carried off their copper to Babylonia. The pots, the shovels, the musical instruments, the bowls, the spoons, and all the copper utensils with which the Kohanim served, the Chaldeans took away. The basins, the pans, the bowls, the pots, the candelabra, the spoons, and the table rods, whether of gold or of silver, the chief executioner took away. The 2 pillars, the 1 sea, the 12 copper oxen that were near the laver stands, that King Solomon had made for the temple of Hashem. There was no weight with which to measure the copper of all these items. This is a description of the pillars. 18 cubits the height of the 1 pillar. A 12-cubit line would encircle it. Its thickness 4 finger breadths, and it was hollow. A copper capital upon it. The height of the single capital 5 cubits, and a netting and pomegranate figures upon the capital all around, all of copper. The same ornaments for the 2nd pillar with the pomegranate. There were 96 pomegranates facing outside. Altogether, there were 100 pomegranates all around the netting. The chief executioner took Sariah, the chief Cohen, and Zephaniah, the deputy Cohen, and the 3 gatekeepers. From the city he took 1 officer who was in charge of the men of war, 7 men from those advisors who seek the king's face, who were found in the city, the secretary of the general of the army, who would marshal the common people for war, and 60 men of the common people who were found inside the city. Nebuzaradan, the chief executioner, took them and brought them to the king of Babylonia at Riblah. The king of Babylonia struck them down and killed them at Riblah, in the land of Hamath. And Judah was exiled from its land. This is the people whom Nebuchadnezzar exiled. In the 7th year, 3,023 Jews. In Nebuchadnezzar's 18th year, from Jerusalem, 832 souls. And in Nebuchadnezzar's 23rd year, Nebuzaradan, the chief executioner, exiled 745 Jewish souls. Altogether, 4,600 souls. It happened in the 37th year of the exile of Jehoiachin, king of Judah, in the 12th month, on the 25th of the month, Evil-Merodach, the king of Babylonia, in the year of his coronation, elevated Jehoiachin, king of Judah, and released him from prison. He spoke kindly with him and set his seat above the seats of the other kings who were with him in Babylonia. He changed from his prison clothing, and he ate his meal before him regularly, all the days of his life. His allowance was a regular allowance given to him from the king, each day's portion on its day, until the day of his death, all the days of his life. Okay then, the prophecies of Jeremiah end with the recount of the events we read in the book of Kings and Chronicles. Ultimately, it is a story of failure. A system was put in place. These are the rules. This is how you make the corrections. Do these things with honesty and beauty, and for this you will receive, as a reward for your obedience, the most amazing life in the world. Avoid doing these things. And as a punishment for your disobedience, you'll have total misery and disaster. The exile to Babylon represents the disaster. It also represents the end of that arrangement, that agreement. A new deal is coming. This deal includes God pouring out his Spirit for all to have. God will provide a leader. We will call this leader a wondrous advisor, a Prince of Peace. We will call this leader Eternal Father and Mighty God. This will be a time of unprecedented peace, but it will be delivered through the crucible of hardship, through the absolute brutality of a man that we don't think anything of. God is going to say that he will now forgive all of us because of the suffering of this guy, this innocent man, this perfected man. This is a servant of God. This is the leader that he is going to send us, the son born from a young woman out of Bethlehem. So what does that mean then? God not remembering sin. This is massive. If sinning brings upon a person the thoughts of shame and guilt because they broke the law or whatever, but God has already told them, no, you're forgiven, then what is the effect sin has? What does it produce? Does it produce shame still? No, I'm forgiven. So what does it produce? This new plan is fantastic because it takes into account, I don't know, there's like a programming. We're going to sin, as evidenced in the story of Adam and Eve. There couldn't really be more ideal scenario than that, yet we did decide that there was another way, and this other way was better. And that's the temptation, and that's what we do. So to not have our inevitable mistakes remembered is fantastic. Thank you for watching. This has been a phenomenal journey. I hope that you have enjoyed it. The NQE is out.